Stupid risks are what make life worth living.
Hello, you are listening to the podcast, So There I Was, which is how all great aviation stories start. This is episode number 26. Keep an eye out for me with Fatty.
You're so mean.
It's going to air on the 247th birthday of our beloved United States Marine Corps. God bless you.
Simplify. Everybody sit at attention while listening to this episode. And happy birthday to all you Marines out there.
Happy birthday, Marines. Fatty was another inspirational interview. I knew it would be because I know his story personally. He has a great aviation story, just like most of our aviators that we interview. Got the aviation bug when he was very young. He got to live his dream, and then
he didn't take the traditional path either. He was enlisted Guardsman, right? In your unit, as I recall.
I know he started in the F-15 unit on the other side of the state,
and they were bracking him base realignment and closure.
Yeah,
and
he got hired to be a pilot in that unit, and whilst he was in flight school, they were bracked.
Yeah,
but if that wouldn't have happened, I never would have met him.
Oh, that's true.
Well, what a great story.
Well, he sounded like quite the character, including slipping you roofies over in Afghanistan, as I recall.
Yeah. That actually happened. I lost about 8 hours of my life.
Does your backside hurt when you wake up in the morning, or
it might have burned a little bit? I don't remember exactly.
Oh boy!
Just kidding, folks. Just kidding. It's a good story.
There you go.
He's got a great story, and I think.
I don't want to do any spoiler on that one, except that it was an incredible challenge overcome to include getting to fly someone special on his crew.
That's right.
That was kind of neat.
Yeah.
So I don't know what else to say because here's the thing. If we go into it, we're going to wind up with a spoiler. Sit back, relax, make sure you're not sitting on the ejection handle.
Don't sit on the ejection handle, darn it.
You're going to need that thing. Episode 26 for the 10th of November. Happy birthday, Marine.
Happy birthday, Marines.
And I lost count of who's one and who's three. It's nothing new. It happens every time. Over Victor, two's blind.
So there I was.
That's how every great aviation tale begins. Repeat here in New Hampshire tonight, joined by my co-host, Fig.
Hello, and I'm in, Kansas City, basically. Kearney, Missouri.
Yeah.
And we have with us tonight, Fatty. Hello, Fatty.
How you doing, Fig?
Welcome aboard. Glad to have you.
Thanks, Repeat. Glad to be here.
Yeah. So, Fig tells me you flew an airplane once. How'd you get into that?
Well, so I grew up in an aviation family. My father flew attack helicopters for the Army, and my grandfather flew general aviation, but worked for Douglas and then McDonnell Douglas, and then retired out of there as a flight test engineer. So family's been in aviation. Got my first flight in a fixed wing aircraft probably when I was about 6.
Okay.
A little Cessna. And
nice. Who took you?
My dad took me in Texas. It was down in Conroe, Texas. And then from there, we had probably a couple year gap of flying from there. But then when we moved out to Baltimore, Maryland, did quite a bit of flying out there. Flew. I remember it's probably what actually got me hooked on flying. I was still small enough, and I had to sit on a phone book, for those that know what those are nowadays, to see over the dash.
Right.
And so we went flying over Chesapeake Bay, and I remember looking outside. I started getting real worried. And I asked my dad what was going on, and he said, "Well, nothing. We're landing." And I said, "Well, I don't understand how we're landing. All I see is water and grass." And he goes, "I know. We're landing. We're landing on a grass strip. Pretty cool little island out there in Chesapeake Bay. It had a seafood restaurant on it, but you landed in the grass strip, parked the airplane, and walked to the restaurant. So pretty cool. I think that's kind of what got me hooked on flying.
That's awesome. I got to go there.
Yeah.
Is it still there?
As far as I know, it is.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool little restaurant. I remember all the shells they shuck, they throw them outside, and that's their actual, like, instead of using mulch, that's what they used for their landscaping.
Yeah, I've seen that operation before.
Is the shells. So it was pretty cool. But
awesome.
You know,
And my wife yells at me when I do that in the backyard.
Yeah, I could see the same at mine. From there, you know, I've during high school, I really wanted to fly. I actually had a couple articles. I was out in St. Louis at Fort Zumwalt. They had this program. Basically, it was like Student Spotlight. I was that at one time, and they said, "Hey, you know, what's your future?" And I said, "I want to fly when I leave Zumwalt." So it was kind of cool because, you know, as a 16-year-old, 17-year-old kid, you don't know really what you're going to do. You know, right. I wanted to fly, but I've always wanted to fly. But
except pilots, most pilots are.
Yeah, that's true. I got told by my guidance counselor I need to keep my options open, or I was going to be disappointed in myself. And so my dad backed me up on that and told me, you know what? If he wants to fly, let him fly. That's what he's going to do. Because they said, give me 3 options. I said, okay, airplanes, helicopters, and jets. You know,
there you go.
That was my 3 options. It was flying.
Nice.
But
that's awesome.
It was pretty neat, actually, because after that article went out, I had guys I'd never met that were pilots. They wrote me, actually, you know, again, this is before email and everything else, but they actually wrote me letters to my house, which is kind of scary how they found that address out. But telling me, hey, if I'm going to be serious about flying, these are some advice to give me to do that. But I started pumping gas at FPO at 17. And then
what airport?
Spirit of St. Louis.
Okay.
Spirit of St. Louis, started pumping gas. It was kind of a cool deal. I worked for this company who's no longer, it was called Thunder Aviation. And I actually worked a deal out with them where I didn't get money. I got credit to go on my account to fly. So
that's better than money.
It
Can't
is.
get taxed for that.
That's why it was a good deal. You know, I was a free employee to them, but I got to go fly. So I did that for a while. And then I met some guys that ended up you know, taking care of their airplanes, doing some washes and stuff on the side that they let me fly their airplanes. So got into that. And then when I was 17, joined the Air National Guard, the Missouri Air Guard, and signed up as a F-15 crew chief. And so, you know, I was hooked in aviation. I knew I wanted to fly, but I knew I needed to go to college. And it was either take a loan and pay my dad back, or because he told me he's not going to pay for it because all my buddies not washed out, but they failed out of school. So he said, hey, I'll give you a loan, but you got to pay me back, or join the Guard and have them pay for it. So I did that. And actually, you guys have interviewed one of your other podcasts, the guy that hired me from
Father.
Father.
Yeah,
okay.
Father was,
Yeah, Father Mike.
Father Mike. He's the guy who hired me to go to pilot training. So
was he at the time, Fatty? Was he the squadron commander?
He was the squadron commander at the time.
Oh, that's awesome.
Hey,
I gotta back up and ask you something. Okay. Did you get your private pilot's license?
I did.
How old were you?
Yeah. So I let myself down. I thought I was going to get it at 17. I was 2 hours short at 17 when I went to basic training. So I got it when I was 18 years old. As soon as I got back from basic training, I finished it.
All right.
So, but started logging time when I was 16. Is when I started logging it.
Well, so how much time did you have when you got hired by the Guard?
I had about 400. I think about 420 hours. And honestly, you know, my wife will make fun of me about it, but it was a lot of just either taking my buddies out or you know, that was back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
When I was dating, I say, hey, you know, you want to go on a flight? So I wasn't making any money.
Chicks dig it. Yeah, but chicks dig it when you take them flying.
You know, except for in Kentucky. We flew to Murray, Kentucky, flew an airplane there, and we're at the bar. And I remember, hey, you know, you want to go flying tomorrow? Trying to pick up on these girls. And, you know, they're like, no, but do you have a boat? And I was like, anybody can have a boat.
I got a plane.
I know. So apparently Murray, Kentucky college girls did not think flying airplanes was cool. If you had a boat, you're okay.
They didn't get it, man. Hey, repeat. How many hours did you have before you went to flight school?
Uh,
With Marine Corps flight school.
yeah. You ask hard questions just because it was so damn long ago. I want to say, I think I was probably between. It's a wide number, between 200 and 400.
Okay.
Somewhere in there. I know I finished college with about 200, 220, something like that. I had my instrument. I had my private instrument, and that was it.
Yeah, we were all about the same. I actually had my commercial and instrument, and I don't know, 350, maybe 400 hours total, tops. All right, awesome. So the Guard hired you to be a pilot in the F-15 unit, Air Guard unit over in St. Louis, correct?
Yep, I got so I had my interview in 2006 and got hired right as the BRAC list came out, the base realignment and closure list. So I was the person selected, and my brother, he's flies for, or he's dirty is what his call sign is. He flies F-16s now, but he was the first alternate, and they were really trying to send us both. That was kind of they knew we were getting BRAC. They thought it'd be cool to send both brothers. We were both crew chiefs out there.
Oh, nice.
To fly. And at the time, we didn't have a follow-on assignment when we first got BRAC and I got hired. We were going to go to we thought we were going to follow the F-15 up to Montana, but that is not the case. We ended up getting B-2s. So with that, I went to Shepherd Air Force Base to NJET, which is the Euro-NATO Joint Jet pilot training. And I was one of the last classes to fly the T-37 for the Air Force. So flew the Tweet. And then after I got done with the T-37, we knew that the options were to be go to B-2s or see if St. Joe would hire me. There was no option to follow the F-15 anymore. I was probably middle of my class. It wasn't like I was a superstar at pilot training. If I would have been, maybe there was a chance, but I don't think there really was. So basically, Missouri said, "Hey, you're gonna fly here, but you gotta figure out what you're gonna do." So I ended up switching bases. Pilot training went down to flew with the Navy down in Corpus, and flew TC-12s, which is a King Air 200.
Okay. Yeah.
So is this before or after you had confirmation that you were going to come to St. Joe?
So no, this is before. So basically, I got called by one of the pilots in St. Louis, and he had a friend who worked in St. Joe. This was Moss, Man of Steel, was his call sign, out of St. Louis. And he goes, "Hey, I got a buddy out at St. Joe, and if you want to fly C-130s," he goes, "I think it's the way to go." And then talking to a lot of those guys out there, they all said, "Hey, if your goal is to go to the airlines, then you should fly something that you're going to get a lot of time fast." And so they said the Herc is probably the way to go out in St. Joe. So like I said, switched out to Corpus to Navy training. And what's kind of funny is the first thing you do when you go in process there, they have a list of airplanes, and you walk up to them and they're like, "What airplane do you want to fly?" And I was like, "Whoa, what do you got?" And so the first thing, they didn't tell me what they got. So the first thing I said, "Well, I'll fly the T-45, why not?"
Right.
Even though I went down there to learn how to fly props,
Yeah.
But if you're going to ask me what Navy trainer I want to fly, I want to fly a T-45. And they're like, no. We have two different prop airplanes. We have a TC-12 and a T-44. And so the difference was a King Air 200 versus the King Air 90.
So which one did you pick?
I picked the 200, even though I had no clue. I at that time in my career, in my life, I thought props were for boats.
200's better than 90 any day, right?
Well, they said the reason I picked the 200, honestly, they told me that the 90 had glass cockpit, which again, I didn't know what that was. I came from a T-37 and a Cessna, so glass to me didn't mean anything at that time. But they told me that the TC-12, the King Air 200, because it's a military version, had a type rating that went with it. And I was like, well, that could probably help me get a job someday. So that's why I went with the C-12.
That was a smart choice.
Yeah. I've actually flown. It's kind of funny. I've flown in the civilian sector. I've flown King Air 200s now, probably because I had that type rating, even though you don't need it. you don't need it, but it still was on my resume.
Right. In fact, that's the largest airplane that doesn't require type rating, right? 12,500 pounds or less. Hey,
it is.
Man, look at
and
me citing my FARs, boys.
Yeah,
That's pretty impressive. I don't know what wrinkle that came out of, but that was impressive.
It was good. Yeah, the only reason why it requires it, or that was allowed to get it for the Navy, is because it has beefed up gear, and actually, like when the gears were tracted up, the wheels still stick below. The gear doors are actually cut out, and so you could actually have a gear up landing and land on the landing gear and be able to stop no problem.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
how about that?
Yeah.
no nose wheel, but means.
All right, let's go back. I want to go back to your T-37 flying days at Shepherd.
All right.
I spent a year at Shepherd one weekend. We did a hurricane evacuation, went up there out of Corpus, and man, that was a long weekend with nothing to do.
What's that? Hervac? You guys Hervac the airplanes?
Yeah.
I liked Shepherd. I was there when I was 18 years old for crew chief training, which I thought wasn't that great because, I was a brand new airman. But then I went back over 21, and it was not a bad place to be.
There you go.
And you were single at the time.
I was single the first time. The second time, I had my wife. We weren't married yet, but I had my wife.
Okay. So I want to ask you a question about the T-37. You are, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, repeat, but Fatty is the number 3 non-gold winger we've had on the show.
Yeah, I think so. There's Father and Double L. Oh, and Jedi. So 4. Number Jedi. 4.
Okay, so you're a number 4 guy.
Okay.
So the T-37. To tell us your fondest memory, scariest memory, most comedic memory of the T-37.
Or were you smart enough to give one back to the Air Force?
Yeah.
Did you ever? I love the airplane. I love it. Back then, Air Force training, since I got to do a little bit of portion of naval training, Air Force training was horrible. It was literally it was a haze the whole time. They didn't care about teaching you how to fly. They cared about hazing you to the point where you didn't stress out. But T-37. So, the nickname is the 1,000-pound dog whistle. It was loud. But I'll tell you, the first time I went out there, and maybe you guys felt the same, maybe you didn't, but prior to going to military pilot training, I thought I was a great pilot. Like I thought I was awesome, right? And first day, doing academics, everything else, I'm realizing, man, there's a lot of stuff I don't know about flying. But that first day, I strapped on the parachute because you had to literally strap on a parachute. It wasn't just a harness; it wasn't built in the seat.
Yeah.
And you go in that jet, and I can remember flipping all these switches. I was like, "Oh man, this is a lot harder to turn a key," right? And then the crew chief walks up as I'm trying to start the engine. The crew chief walks up and he starts shaking the airplane, like literally pushing the airplane, shaking it like you would do to mess with your buddies in their car. And I didn't know what the heck he was doing. Well, apparently that the starters like that. The igniters like that in the T-37.
What was it? You jostled the fuel around in the burner cans to get
I don't know exactly what it was, but they would shake the airplane every single time you started that aircraft, right?
Okay, that's the first time I've ever heard that. That's awesome.
It starts up and it's a jet. You hear that jet sound, and it's a high pitched jet. But that's still kind of cool. But you're still first flight. You're super nervous. It's your dollar ride, and I think Father went over what the dollar ride was, which your first Air Force airplane ride. And but I remember getting to the end of the runway, and from start to holding short of that runway, it was a cluster. I didn't everything that I thought I remembered, I didn't remember anything, right? And so I just remember thinking, oh man, this instructor is going to bust me from just taxiing. But all of that thought went away as soon as I got cleared to take off. I went in the runway and I pushed those throttles forward, and it sounded like a jet. It was awesome. I remember releasing the brakes, and you got to think about comparing it to a Cessna and maybe a little bit high performance airplanes.
With all the vibration and everything, right? There was no vibration in that.
Nope, it was awesome. You pushed it up. It sounded like that roar of those little engines. They stopped whistling whenever the power's pushed up.
Okay.
And it started hauling butt down the runway. And I remember, taking off the first time and thinking, "Holy crap, I'm flying a jet." And then I realized that I was not a good pilot.
Things happen a little faster.
Yeah, everything was happening way too fast. Almost overspeeded my gear the first flight. We get out to the area, and it's basically a demo. It's not even a demo, dude. It's almost just watching your instructor fly it. But you got to fly a little bit. But it was just one of the coolest experiences. I remember thinking, "Holy cow! Well, what am I doing? I'm in a real airplane, and for the first time in my life, I was getting paid to fly, which was awesome."
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the very first memory I had of the T-37. And the second one, so it had really long spool up time for the engines. We had attenuator. I don't know if anybody talked about that. We had a attenuator on it. So basically, they had these little, almost like reversers, like on a normal jet, that would come out if you had the throttles between a certain range and the speed brake on, and you were under, I think, 40% RPM or something like that, or N1. I can't remember exactly, but they would have these attenuators come out so you could keep your thrust up, and go slow. Because if you didn't have your speed brake out and those attenuators out, and you were back at idle to try to land and had to go around, it was like a 19-second spool up time. So you were never going to go around. You were going to hit the ground.
See, right. Well, that's the thing that has killed a lot of new jet pilots, right? That have flown a lot of props. That a jet engine takes a lot longer to spool up, so you need to not get behind. It killed a famous baseball player, Thurman Munson, in a Cessna Citation. He got low and slow and pushed the throttles up, but it was way too late. Hit the ground before it reacted. Yep. So that's okay. Yeah, we used to do that. We flew with the boards out. Was it the A4 or the T2? Do you remember, Fig?
Both, man. Boards out, gear down.
Yeah.
You way up on the throttle.
Yeah, so you kept the power up, and it was ready to rock and roll. And all you had to do is pull your boards in when you hit mill power to go around. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. I remember one time I realized why you do all that. I forgot to put the boards out, and man, I pushed the power up to just add a little power and realized it was not happening. And so I threw it in the mill power. It still was probably the hardest landing I've ever had in my life. I'm surprised that it didn't count as a crash. It was pretty bad. It scared me, scared my instructor. After that, we decided.
Hold on a second. I've sat through a couple of your landings, so I don't know if that's the hardest.
Well, I said probably. So,
well, in the Air Force.
I'm busting your balls, bro. I'm busting your balls.
No, it's good, but but after that, then I realized, there's.
So you never had your hand on the handle when you're flying T-37s. You never thought, this is it, I'm giving it back.
No, honestly, I mean, we had two engines, and it was a pretty stable airplane. It was a lot of fun. Like, I think back now, if I could go back now and fly it. Like, I think it would have been a great sunsetting tour in the Air Force to go back and fly the T-37. Number one, I think it'd be way better to do that sunset tour compared to a FAPE, a first assignment instructor pilot, because, you guys know how it was. The difference between 0 and 100 hours in the military was huge, and then between 100 and 200 hours was huge. But then when you're looking at 200 to 500 or 200 to 1,000, I mean, you're a totally different aviator. And so you're having brand new instructor pilots go at 200 to 250 hours. It's crazy to me.
Yeah, that's silly.
They know their procedures.
They do, but they don't have the experiences.
No, right.
And I think about that as there's a lot of things that have happened in an airplane that I've used other experiences to be like, okay, what should I do?
Right.
So I don't know, but the airplane it was a blast to fly. But I would say one thing, flying that airplane has taught me how to fly instruments on needles only, which is good.
Okay, what do you mean
so
by
you
needles?
went from Air Force pilot training to naval pilot training.
Yeah.
And if you could sum it up in a few bullet points, what was the biggest philosophical difference between Air Force pilot training and naval aviation pilot training?
So the naval pilot training, they wanted to teach you how to fly. They want to waste their money. And so they were there to teach you. They told you what they expected from you. And if you did that, you were good to go. In the Air Force, it was all a game. It was a big haze. They taught you, but that was not their main goal. At least that's how I feel, because I was stressed out the whole time in Air Force training. And when I went to naval flight training, I learned everything I needed to, but I was on my boat every day by noon.
Well, okay.
Every day.
So, so when did you get? When you got your wings, you were in Corpus, right?
I got my wings June 25th, I believe, of 2009. It was the day that Michael Jackson died.
Yeah.
That's and I think it's
who
the
else?
25th.
Oh, hang on. I'm sorry. I got to jump in with trivia. Who else died that day?
Oh.
Wait a minute. Yeah. The same day as Michael Jackson?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Is this
if you're a teenage boy in the 70s, you'll know.
Farrah Fawcett.
There you go, brother.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's right.
That was it. All right. Sorry for that diversion.
On my wall.
So it's either the 25th or the 26th. I have a plaque my brother gave me for getting my wings, but it has the wrong date. So it's one of those 2 days. It's either the 25th or 26th, but I know it's the day.
It was over a couple days.
Yeah. So, but got my wings, kind of cool. Got my wings with the Navy. It was really a lot of fun. I enjoyed it a lot.
All right. So they gave you, so at that point, tell us the process for you getting into our unit there in St. Joe. Because I just remembered one time at drill, you were standing there in the ready room or in the heritage room, and I'm like, who the hell are you?
Well, it wasn't the heritage room, because I built the heritage room. But.
All right, so what it was I don't know what it was back then. It was the pilot section.
Yeah, the pilot section. Yeah. So, got my wings and I went back to St. Louis. We didn't have any airplanes at that time. I don't believe we had. I think we got rid of our last one, and so basically they were still working on transitioning to the B2. And what they did was they set me up. Moss set me up with the interview in St. Joe, and I can remember it clear as day because it was with ended up having my interview with the Ninja, and so I showed up on July drill.
July 2006.
Nope, it was 2009. So
July 2009.
Yeah, it was the weekend of July 12th, and the reason I remember that is because of my birthday. So it was July 11th was the Saturday, and I showed up there, and I didn't know any of these guys, but I showed up wearing all my St. Louis fighter pilot patches.
I kind of remember.
And everybody was like, "Who the hell is this guy?" And I didn't know. Nobody knew I wasn't supposed to be there, so I thought everybody was expecting me. So I just walk in thinking, "Okay, hey, how are you guys doing? I'm here to talk and get hired here." Well, that's not the way they did it. Or they do it at St. Joe now. So anyway, I walk in and I'm like, "Hey, I'm Fatty, and looking to find." I can't remember who I was supposed to see, but either way,
where's the rush chairman?
Yeah, so I can't remember who it was, but the issue was the guy that Moss set this up with was deployed, and he didn't tell anybody at the squadron that I was going to be coming in for an interview in this July drill. So nobody there knew who the heck I was and why I was there.
Yeah, so, at that time, we were doing rotations over to Afghanistan. Repeat.
Okay.
And so part of the squadron was gone. Part of the squadron was there because I went there. I rotated out in August of that year. So yeah, I get it.
So I get there like who are you and why are you here? So I tell them my story. I'm like, "Hey, I'm a Missouri Guard airman. Got my wings. I'm looking for a home. I would like to fly Hercs, not go to the B2." And so met a couple guys there, ended up, having a few cocktails with those guys and spilling my guts and thinking that night maybe I shouldn't have spilled my guts, but I was me. There was no secret.
I kept my mouth shut.
Yeah, I didn't. I was my total self. So the next day, they put a board together, and like I said, the Ninja was on there. He was not the squadron commander, but he was on the hiring board at the time. And I had the interview, and he shook my hand and said, "Hey, welcome to the 139th Airlift Wing. We'll be talking, and soon we'll get you some Little Rock dates to go to C-130 school." And I was like, "Awesome," And I said, "Hey, thanks. This is the best birthday present I can ask for." And he goes, "Oh yeah, it's your birthday?" And I said, "Yeah." So July 12th, my birthday. He goes, "Well, hey, it's mine too." So never forget that. So we shared the same birthday. Got hired at the to fly C-130s on my birthday. So pretty cool.
So when did you go to C-130 school? Just dates?
It would have been later that month,
wow, end of August? End of July?
It was either July or August of 2009. Yeah, it was real quick.
Okay.
It was super quick. And then I got back in December, and I was home for a month, got all my in processing done, but then I had to go to water survival, or land survival, not water, land survival still. So I started actually flying with the squadron in February or March, done with everything, all my training.
And that was
2010
of 10.
Yep.
So I had a flashback. We're leading into the fall of 2010, and we deployed to Afghanistan again in that time frame. Fatty and I both deployed. We were not on the same flying crew. We had hard crews then. Okay. We were flying out of Bagram, and I think Fatty needs to tell the story of how he roofied a senior officer on that particular deployment.
I'm not retired yet, right? So
was she cute?
It was
no. She was me.
Oh boy. No, she wasn't. I like your pronouns, Fig.
I feel like I know, nobody loves going to war except for we're all kind of brainwashed, and that's what we're supposed to do. So we love going to war. But it's, I think, for as far as an aviator goes, you can't ask for any better kind of situation than that. You get back at the beginning of the year, and at the end of the year, you are literally flying in combat. So I was, there's still a first lieutenant. I was on a good crew, still friends with a lot of those guys, close friends with a lot of those guys now. And, but we were, I don't know if we were, I would say we were probably the party crew. We were a party crew, but general order number 1 is you can't drink over in Afghanistan. So you got to find other ways to keep busy. So, all I know, and I'm not saying it was me, I'm just saying I know that a senior officer might have been in our hooch. I will say it was in our hooch.
Okay.
And
on
it was
Christmas
either
night.
Christmas. Yeah, I think it was
Christmas night.
Christmas.
Yeah.
And you got to make your near beers go a lot further. And so we sleep, and so we got some sleeping aids, and maybe we'd have that with the near beer, and that would help it feel like a real beer.
Nice.
Well, anyway, not me, but somebody else may have asked Fig, "Hey, you want one of these cocktails?" And he said no. Well, that person decided that he didn't know what he wanted, and he wanted one, and so they gave him one. And then whenever he was ready for his next one, he got caught giving him his next one. Fig caught him. And all I know is that hypothetically, I thought I was going to get my butt kicked, So the next couple of days were pretty rough for me because I thought I had really done something that I was never going to get forgiven for. And nice. And to go back on this, it's Fig and I got pretty close real quick because we both enjoy the lake. And so I don't even know if you were my flight commander at the time yet, but at this point, I know we spent a lot of time out in the lake. So I thought, oh man, I really screwed up and I lost a friend.
Well, the answer was yes, I was your flight commander.
Okay.
And yes, I was plotting on different ways I was going to disassemble your body in Afghanistan and throw it in the burn pit one piece at a time, and no one was ever going to know where you went.
Yeah.
But it all worked out. Hey, do you have any?
You were the squadron commander at the time?
No. I was
Okay.
I was the A flight commander.
Okay.
So it was like if you split the squadron officers up into 3 squads, I was the number 1 squad.
Gotcha.
HMFIC.
The deck commander.
Air Force does things a little different. Hey, so that Afghanistan deployment that we were doing a lot of flying. Do you have any recollections of missions or
I do. And actually,
events?
I have one that I flew quite a bit. I know you flew at one time. I actually dropped. You didn't. But so back in 2010, we were doing a lot of airdrops in Afghanistan. It was awesome. It was probably the best flying you can get in a Herc that there was.
Hey, tell everybody why we were doing airdrops.
You talk about supporting the guys, the troops on the ground, or what?
Well, it's because nobody could drive on the shitty roads because they were all, they'd get bombed.
All the IEDs and everything else on the road. So basically, what they would do is they had all these the Army and Marine guys. They would be out in forward operating bases, small bases, and they were the guys in the in the crap. We were Air Force guys. We're living on an Air Force base. We're where they came for R&R. Taking off the first time, which is to relax and recovery. But so we would bring them supplies, whether it's ammunition or food or water, and we would drop it to all these forward operating bases. And there was one that was a pretty difficult airdrop. The drop zone was called Xander, and it was really awesome. Like, I don't know how to explain it except for it is beautiful and awesome. And it's in Afghanistan. You wouldn't think that, but it's in a river valley.
It's in the Korengal Valley. Yep.
And it's along the river and surrounded by high terrain on both sides. And you have to fly in between the terrain, and you almost get lost in how beautiful it is. And so I think our crew did that drop probably at least 6 times. A couple times we did it prior. We had a crew get shot, but basically the way we were doing it first is we'd go and do the airdrop. We'd get half of the bundles out, and we'd come back around 20 minutes later and do the other half. And we were like, you know what? Somebody's going to be getting shot. This is not a smart way to do it. Can we get it all one pass? And they're like, nope, can't do that. Well, anyway, a crew after us came in to do that same drop, and on their second pass, they were ready for them, and they got shot. They were all okay, but anyway, after that, they're like, well, hey, maybe we should look at trying to fly a little lower and get it all done in one pass. We're like, oh, well, that's kind of what we said. So we went out and did it the next day, and it went perfect. It was probably the most perfect airdrop I've ever been part of in my life. Like, better than training airdrops, everything else. But again, we're enjoying the terrain and just getting lost, how beautiful it was. The drop went off. The military guys that were on the ground got the stuff they needed, and it was perfect. But that brings me to, I have dropped there at Xander. And what about you, Fig?
I was going to drop there one day. It was going to be an emergency airdrop because they hadn't been resupplied in a couple of days. And my navigator, who is going to remain nameless, he lost track of where we were. And I turned the corner. I'd been there the day before riding along just to kind of see what it looked like. And I remember as we turned the last corner around this big piece of terrain, I remember in the back of my mind thinking, this seems like where we should be slowing down, and we're still doing, well, doors closed. We were going as fast as we could, basically. We turned the corner, and immediately he started, I heard him screaming, not over the ICS, but just, in the cockpit. And I could see the drop zone up ahead, and he started screaming out, drop calls, which you can't do. And so the bottom line is, no, we did not drop. We went flying by that drop zone at the speed of heat. And I remember looking down at those Army guys, and they were looking, I could see the question marks above their head as we went blowing by with the doors closed.
Just providing an air show today, gents.
Yeah. There's a flyby of C-130 carrying all your shit that you wanted that you're not going to get today.
So back up and unpack that a little bit for me. What all is involved in a drop? You must have all kinds of CG issues, emergency procedures to deal with the fact if something gets hung up on extract.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of emergency procedures. Depends on what you're going to be dropping. That day, we're dropping CDS, which is smaller container delivery system.
Okay.
And we have three different drops we kind of do. We have that where it's basically like a 4x4 bundle. Then we have heavy equipment, which is like you see Humvees and small boats, that kind of stuff going out. And then we have personnel that jumps out. Later on, which we do now, we had something called LCLA, which is low cost, low altitude. And I actually have a story about that a little later we'll get to. The day that Fig was doing it and the day that I did it, dropping CDS to the guys, which is usually, like I said, ammunition, water, MREs, something like that.
Hey, and basically, repeat, you slow down and you set a deck angle.
Okay.
Like you retract the flaps until you get the proper deck angle. And then the loadmaster just cuts a cord when he sees the green light, and that stuff just rolls out the back, and the parachutes deploy as it falls.
Okay.
As opposed to a heavy equipment that gets extracted out the back by a parachute.
Yeah. That was the LAPES, right? Low altitude parachute extraction.
Yep, they used to do that too. But we do heavy equipment still has an extraction chute.
Okay.
Up at high altitude.
So yeah, there's a pretty good CG shift, but go ahead and talk about that.
Yeah.
Patty.
So with it's actually something really cool. We got to do a lot in Afghanistan. We can in the slick C-130H, we could do 16 CDS bundles. And so when those things start going out the back, you can definitely, it's all about the deck angle, like Fig was saying, keeping that same deck angle. So what you're trying to do is keeping that deck angle the same as the CG shifting, because it's constantly going back because the stuff in the front's rolling backwards, and you're constantly have to push a little bit of forward stick pressure as the CG is rolling back.
Okay.
But you don't want to push too much that you reduce the deck angle enough that it can't roll out. So it's
Gotcha.
just it's a finesse, and you're going slow, and that's one thing that.
How slow? Tell us the speed.
Usually 130. If you're heavy, you'd be 140, but usually 130 knots. And
how far is that above stall speed? About 20 knots,
you're
or is it a percent? 10% above stall speed.
You know,
I
the
don't
thing
remember
is,
off the top of my head.
with the C-130, with that big straight wing and all.
Oh, I
those
bet
flaps,
it's hard to. Yeah, I bet it's hard to stall.
With
the power.
13-foot props, it's really hard to.
Yeah.
I mean, it'll stall, but it really won't stall with their powers.
Yeah.
And the thing about it's a balloon wing with those props. As soon as you add power, you can get out of a stall. But the thing that's a lot different, especially like, and Fig would know this flying both aircraft, but like a lot of our jet brothers that flew both airplanes realizes, in a jet, it's very small corrections on the flight controls to get the aircraft to do quite a bit. Well, when you're going that slow, especially in a formation, you might be turning the yoke stop to make the airplane to go straight, which, it's just, that's when you're talking about that slow speed. You're not stalling, but your flight controls don't have a lot of,
don't have the authority.
At that speed.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
yeah. Hey, the first time I flew a C-130, I thought I had a controllability problem.
And you did.
Just because it took so much, movement of the controls to make anything happen.
Yeah. Well, to divert a little bit on that, then, I remember going out for my interview for my airline job, and they said, "Oh, you're going to fly a 747 for your interview." So I went out to the training center in Denver and rented 2 hours of a 747 simulator and went through the profile. And wow. Oh my God, am I glad I did. It was the best money I ever spent, because flying a light tactical jet and then going to a heavy jet, the difference in control inputs was like, oh my God. I mean, think about it. A Harrier fully loaded with all the fuel and bombs it could carry weighs less than what one wing tank of fuel holds in a DC-10. So
yeah,
it just, the inputs required are magnified 100-fold, I guess is the way to say it. It was amazing.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah,
well, that makes sense. Yeah, you're just really honking on the flight controls. The slower you get, the more you have to deflect.
Yep. So, but it's pretty cool. But like I said, and I could see exactly, like, whenever we heard that Fig's crew just blew by the drop zone, we knew why. Like I told you, it was probably one of the most beautiful places to fly in Afghanistan. And the terrain was awesome. There was a river there. And, we were looking outside. We're sightseeing. We're like, oh, man, that's beautiful. Look at that. Oh, that's so cool. And you don't think about that. When you hear Afghanistan, you don't think about that.
They grow rocks and sand there, right?
Yeah. And so
it looked like Colorado. It looked like anywhere in Colorado.
Nice.
Yeah. And
not like Afghanistan.
And where Fig's crew was at, whenever, it's funny because we still joke around. What his navigator called was 1 minute. And so that's a 1 minute warning to the airdrop. And the loadmaster in the back of his, he says he's got a
1 minute to what?
Country accent. 1 minute to what? And it's a joke that we have around now. And whenever everybody retires, it's still going to be around. Because
I had patches made for my crew that said 1 minute to what?
Yeah.
And
Nice.
we wore them for the rest of the deployment because it was that awesome.
Yeah. It's pretty good. But anyway, that was a good deployment. Actually, to the point at the very end, I tried to stay with Fig to fly after he'd forgiven me from the roofie incident. I tried to stay and fly with him for a couple extra weeks, but that didn't work out.
Nice.
But,
So that was 10/11. That was the fall of 10. That was over Thanksgiving. We had the holidays, and then into 11. Something happened.
yeah. So
in July of 11.
so that was in 12. But before I get there, I need to tell you. Okay, so everything kind of ties together, like everything. So doing the airdrops and stuff in 10 led me to talking to some contractor buddies and one of the guys at our unit who was a contractor over in Afghanistan. So in 11, I got hired as a contractor doing airdrops for a company who's no longer in business. It was Evergreen, but they're out. They're gone.
I remember seeing their tails all over. Yeah.
Yep. But the cool thing was we flew Casa 212s, which is a tiny little box that looked like it would not be any fun to fly. And the tails you probably saw were the 747s. And the cool thing was, we made more money than them.
Fair enough.
They didn't like that. But my only job was to do airdrop. That was something that as contractors we did before the Air Force. It was direct support for the Army, trying to keep all of the Special Forces guys safe. So basically, if you could drop the equipment they needed to them inside their FOBs, their forward operating base, they didn't have to go outside the wire. They were less likely to get shot at or hurt or anything. So we flew these CASAs in formation, 2 and 3 ships, and we would drop in a 50 by 50 meter drop zone, which I know for you fighter guys sounds huge, but for an airdrop with a parachute, that's pretty small.
Yeah, that's small.
And so we would drop inside these FOBs doing low cost, low altitude airdrops. So we would drop these things at anything except for fuel. We were dropping at 150 feet is when we would exit the airplane. And basically the parachute type looked like a black trash bag. And all it did was stabilize it enough to hit the ground. And then it had a bunch of honeycomb cardboard that would take the impact of the drop. And if we were dropping fuel, like 55-gallon drums, we'd drop them at 75 feet. Flying this airplane, I look back on it, it was a lot of fun. I wouldn't do it now that I have kids. Back then I had, I was alone and unafraid, no armor, can't shoot back. And, we were getting shot at a lot, but
what could
doing
go
these
wrong?
airdrops, and it was a blast. And that's all we did was airdrops.
Wow.
Hey, I want to just highlight something, because some of our listeners probably won't understand. But you at the time were a traditional guardsman, right?
Yes.
And so this contractor job, that was your real job. The Air Guard was just a part-time job because you were a traditional guardsman.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So
I just want to make sure that was plain as day.
that airdrop job or the contractor job, I would do that 45 days on, 45 days off. And my 45 days off, I was flying as much as I could at the Guard. So basically I had 2 part-time jobs or 2 full-time jobs. It was definitely a full-time job, but I was working 6 months at each job, basically. It was a lot of fun, but I was getting a lot of hours, which that was the big reason why I did it. You know, I kind of told my wife at the time, I was like, hey, this is the way for me to get to the airline even faster than the military is I'll be flying 1,000 hours a year compared to, 300-400. So went out and did that, which looking back was the right decision for me because like you kind of hinted to earlier, I did all at 2011 and the first half of 2012. And then I went on some military orders, flying the Herc again in 2012, right up to, I got off orders July 3rd, and then July 4th, 2012, there I was, this is the story.
So this was a life-changing day.
It was a pretty exciting day, followed up by the worst day of my life. So my wife and I got married on July 4th. So it was a great day of our anniversary. We found out we were having a boy, our first child. We found out we were having a boy that day. And then that led to a celebration.
You talk about on July 4th, 2012, you found out she was pregnant?
Found out
that it was going to be a boy.
It was going to be a boy.
I'll be darned.
And my big thing was I wanted a boy. I got to carry on my last name. So, like I said, best day of my life, but also the worst day of my life at that time. I'm a patriot, as I know both of you are. And so we believed in celebrating the 4th of July in style. Barbecue, as Kansas City, as you know, Fig, in Kansas City, we were big in barbecue. Smoked a bunch of food up for the neighborhood.
Some of the best in the world. Yeah.
Yeah. All threw money together, and we had a buddy who owned a fireworks stand, and so he got us fireworks at his rate. So we had this huge party, probably about 75 people to 100 people in our neighborhood here, food, and then we did a fireworks display. And we thought we were doing everything right. So it was a dry year, so we made sure we turned our sprinklers on. We tried to spray down the roofs of our houses. We were one of the only counties around us that could actually shoot fireworks off.
And just so we're clear on this, you guys were putting on a commercial fireworks display.
That's what we were doing. Yeah, it wasn't like a true like the boards where you hit a button and it fires off, but it was
It was
but
you
big
were using those kind of fireworks.
Yeah, it was
big stuff. Okay.
Yeah. Basically the biggest you can get to without needing PVC for your tubes. So anyway, we had, like I said, we prepped the yards and the houses to make sure we didn't catch any fires. And we ended up, even the tubes, we screwed down to boards to 2x4s so they couldn't tip over, that kind of stuff. Had that stuff all in the middle of the street. Everybody was up against their houses. Nobody was close to this. And basically there was 4 of us. And one person would do some kind of low firework shooting off like a fountain or something. And then one person would drop a mortar in, and then I was lighting it with an actual torch. It wasn't like I was sitting there with a little lighter or a puff, but, so it was a quick, and then we run away. We run back. Basically, if you think about most U.S. neighborhoods, you have a regular 30 to 40 foot wide road, and then, a 5 or 6 foot little piece of grass, and then a sidewalk after that. So we would run to the sidewalk. So we should be about 20 to 30 feet away from any fireworks that are going off after they're lit. So I remember it was a really hot day, like hot enough that if you do partake in alcoholic beverages, if it gets so hot, you're really not in the mood to drink that much. Like we were drinking water for every one drink. I was drinking 2 waters. It was like, 11 o'clock at night, still 100 degrees outside. It was hot. We were drinking, but not to the excessive as maybe some of my college days. But about 11 o'clock, I remember looking at our watch and talking to the other 3 guys who were shooting these fireworks. I'm like, man, I'm tired of shooting these off. And they're like, yeah, man, we got to be done pretty soon. But we still had more than half the fireworks left. But we were like, well, we'll just do another half an hour, 45 minutes, and then we'll call it done, be done by midnight. So we kept going.
So did you guys all chip in on this? This sounds expensive.
We did. We spent about, so like I said, we spent about $1,500 in fireworks, but we bought them at wholesale price because my buddy owned a fireworks stand. So it was more around like $3,500 to $4,000 worth of fireworks. Wow. I got a picture. It's ridiculous. So anyway,
get to it.
I'm getting to it. So here we go. So 11 o'clock, we talked about that. 11:23, we shoot off a firework. I light it and I run away. And again, I told you the process of lighting it off. And I get to the sidewalk and I turn around. And then as I turn around, a purple flash comes right towards me. And it happened in like slow motion, right? It was slow enough that I could see this purple flash coming to me, but fast enough I couldn't do anything about it. And it hit me directly in the right eye. And I remember I slammed my hand up to my eye and I was like, it's in my eye. And my eye's on fire. And my buddies thought I was joking around at first. And then they realized I wasn't joking. And there was a little kiddie pool in my neighbor's yard. And they pushed me in the pool. And I remember it was like The Graduate. Remember the movie The Graduate where the kid goes in the pool?
Yeah.
Sitting underneath and the song's playing.
Dustin
Hoffman. I felt
yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Sound
Dustin
Silence.
Hoffman. Yeah. Oh, that's right. Sound of Silence.
So I I remember going underneath that water and trying to open my eye, and it was in like slow motion, and I could not open my eye, and I started freaking out. And to the point where, since I could open my eye, that's the only thing I was concentrating on. I didn't think about that I couldn't breathe when I was underneath the water. So my buddies grabbed me and pulled me back out. They're like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "I can't open my eye." It's like, "I can't see. I don't know what's going on." And so at that point, that firework had hit me right in the right eye, and my buddy threw me in his truck, and he's like, "Well, where should we take you?" And I was like, "Take me, just down my neighborhood, a couple blocks, we have an ambulance station." I was like, "Take me to the ambulance station." And I remember everything was kind of slow motion. They say, whenever you have a traumatic injury, something kind of slows down, and you can kind of remember that.
Yeah,
stuff.
time compression. Yeah.
And so I remember he gets in and he hits the gas. And at this time I didn't have any kids, but I was like, "Hey, slow down. It's 4th of July. There's kids." It's like, "Don't rush." So I told him to slow down, even though I didn't know how bad my eye was. So he slowed down. He took me to the ambulance station. I remember I walked in it and the ambulance was gone. And I was like, "Oh man, you gotta be kidding me."
Of course.
I walked back out to his truck and I'm like, "Okay, I guess you gotta take me to the hospital." And as we start pulling out, the ambulance was pulling back in the parking lot. So I got up out of the truck and I knocked on the window and I said, "Hey, I just got hit in the eye with a firework. Can you guys help me out?" And they said, "Yeah, get in." So I got in. The next thing I remember him saying is, "Hey, because you've been drinking," because they asked me a question. "Have you been drinking?" Of course. Yes.
Hey, I want to stop you.
What's up?
I want you to skip these kind of details.
Oh, okay.
And go right to the injuries. What injuries did you sustain?
Okay. So what ended up happening was in the coming days, we didn't really know how bad it was. They knew that I had a cornea, that my cornea was burned, but they didn't know how bad yet because of all the debris and stuff in my eye. So I had to get debrided and everything else. But basically, about 3 or 4 days later, they realized that I had a full thickness cornea burn, right? So there's basically like 5 layers of your cornea, and all 5 layers were burned. Again, they didn't know what that meant. They didn't know if they told me, he said, "You might be able to see in a month, or you may have no vision in it at all, or you might have to do surgery." They didn't know anything. So
what about your eyelids?
And my eyelid was also burned. The upper lid was burned the worst. It basically about halfway and right in the middle had a big arch in it. So if I closed my eye, you could still see my eyeball behind it.
It was very significant.
Yeah, it was
very significant injuries.
I'm lucky that's all that happened. I mean, because other people had these same injuries and either totally ruptured the globe of their eye, or it popped the eyeball basically, or they've died. So I got pretty lucky.
My eyes hurt listening to this.
Do what?
I know, right?
My eyes hurt listening to this. Yes.
So
the only thing I could remember, the first thing I thought of was, I said, "Man, my career's over." I mean, I literally said it outside or out loud. I said, "Hey, my career's over."
Your flying career.
Yeah. The other thing that I said, which was kind of funny, this kind of goes back to that 2010 deployment. I had a buddy that the power to go out, since I was the brand new kid, I had to go turn on. Anytime the power went out, I had to go reset the breaker. And basically their saying was, "Hey, fatty, I can't see." And that meant me go outside in the winter air, go to the breaker box and flip the breaker back on. So one of the guys that was on my crew was there at the hospital that night. He finally gets in. I kept asking for him. And I don't know why it was so important to me, but I kept asking for him. When he came in, he goes, "Hey buddy, how you doing?" And I said, "Hey, I can't see." And so to me, it was hilarious. To him, it wasn't so funny, but I thought it was just funny, so from there, I was at the Guard every day, except for the weekends. I love to fly the Herc, and I wanted to upgrade as fast as possible. But when this happened, I didn't want anybody to know. And as you guys know, and as a military aviator, we never want our flight docs or anything to know about anything until we know what the heck's going on, right? So
right. Mm-hmm.
I didn't tell anybody. I mean, there was multiple reasons. Number one, I didn't know if I was going to be able to see it again. Number two, I didn't want anybody to start looking into my medical records, because if I could see again, I didn't know if I could. I didn't want people to know right away until I could control the situation. And number three, I mean, it was a dark time in my life. I mean, you guys know, as an aviator, if you can't fly, I mean, and we talked about this already, as young kids, it's all we want to do. So it was a dark time in my life where I was like, you know what? I just need to be by myself.
I mean, yeah. How many times do you joke? Yeah, I should be selling shoes.
Yep.
Instead of doing this in the middle of the night with people shooting at me, and then when your option is to sell shoes, I imagine it does get pretty dark. I'd rather be having people shoot at me.
It's definitely not good. It wasn't probably not even 5 days, probably like July 9th, maybe. I got a knock on my door, and then there was Fig, my wife next door. He said, well, where's Fatty? And she's like, well, he's okay. She's like, well, what happened? He's like, what do you mean what happened? She wasn't going to tell him. So anyway, he came in and I was on the couch. I was on a lot of pain meds, all bandaged up. Still didn't know exactly what was going on yet, but told him about it. He was my flight commander and my friend. And he's like, dude, we got to take care of you. We got to figure this out. He went to bat for me at that time. But basically what kind of the ruling was is that since I was on orders on July 3rd and not on July 4th, that the military had they didn't care about it.
Right.
So to speak. They had
no financial care.
Yeah. No commitment to that, to it at all.
Right.
It was a very gray area in the regs that allowed me, should I be able to allow it on base or not? And at the time, the commander was like, nope, you cannot come on base. But Fig went to fight for me and said, you know what? He's doing all this other stuff. And at first, they still said no. And then that brings us to the Heritage Room that Fig had mentioned. Right before this accident, I had got the Heritage Room approved to build our squadron bar. And so, like I said, that dark time in my life, I needed something to do. So what I started doing was riding in with some buddies to work, even though I couldn't get paid and I couldn't be there on military status. I went in and I built the bar during the day because I had nothing to do. I needed something to keep busy. So that's what I did. And basically Fig's like, hey, this dude's coming in every day using power tools and everything else, building a bar. Why are we not putting him on orders? And long story short, the Guard did take care of me. We talk about the Guard being family, and they did. They took very good care of me for about 4 or 5 years. I had 32 surgeries. I'm still as blind as I was day one. But at the best case, I mean, that's the horrible thing. But realistically, all these surgeries I did, I mean, I had some awesome surgeons. I saw the best surgeons probably in the world.
And you're talking surgeries, not just cornea transplants, but also plastic surgeries to rebuild your eyelid. Your eyelid wouldn't stay closed at night, so they built a spring into it to keep it shut at night so that the cornea wouldn't dry out. I mean, we're talking, holy cow, this guy was under the knife a lot.
Yeah, I had stem cell surgeries. Like took stem cells out of my dad's eye and then out of a cadaver and put them in mine. And at one point, I actually got to 20/40 vision out of my right eye, which was amazing because I had zero. But like Fig said, my eye wouldn't stay shut when I sleep and the cornea would dry out. So what they had to do was try to find a way to help that muscle because it was so damaged, keep my eyelid closed. Well, the spring was doing that job. They replaced my cornea with those stem cells and I could see 20/40. But the only way for me to see was to actually grab my eyelid and pull it open with my fingers. So what they did then was adjust the tension of that spring so that I could possibly open it up just enough to see. Even though the issue was at night when I was sleeping, it would still open up too much, enough to dry it out. So it was a lose-lose. Like either I could have a good cornea where I could see if I held my eye open with my hands, or I could open my eye, but then I couldn't see because my cornea would dry out. So in the end, I tried to have the best of both worlds, which ended up being my eye not being able to see. So my cornea is totally fogged over again. I was put on a project for the Air Force, and I actually got some good experience in it, and it took care of me for those 5 years. And then finally, talking to Fig and one of our other flight docs, he said, hey, you can fly for the civilian sector. And I said, oh, yeah? And he told me how to do it. And I said, okay. He said, but if you're going to do that, you need to have some proof that you know how to fly. And if you can start flying in civilian, we'll try to push for an exception to policy waiver for you to fly for the Air Force, which had never been done. There's never been a monovision Air Force pilot before. Going back to that contracting company, even though Evergreen was gone, it got bought out by a different company. I called that company and I said, hey, I've been on military/medical leave since 2011. I got my class 1 medical. Can I come back? So I ended up getting a class 1 medical from something called a SOTA, a statement of demonstrated ability. And basically all you have to do is go fly with the FSDO and do everything you can do in a commercial check ride with your disability, which mine is one eye. So it was pretty easy. Just go tune the radios, point out some stuff on a chart, point out all of the visual stuff you'd see outside that match the chart, and do some landings. Not a big deal. Literally from the time I started that process to the time I was back to flying was about 3 weeks. I took my first flight with Fig, his Cessna, and we went flying for about 45 minutes. And he said, dude, you're ready. And it had been 5 years since I'd flown.
Wow.
So I think total time we flew that day was about an hour, and then went back. That was like on a Monday or Tuesday. And I took my check ride with the FSDO on Friday. And the following Saturday, I was in training again with my old company that has now bought out by somebody else. And the following week, I was in Africa flying the Casa 212.
How about that?
That's dangerous.
Yeah. So
I got a couple questions here then, because wow, first of all, I'm impressed. That is amazing. That is a challenge overcome, and that's inspirational. I got to tell you that right up front. But how? That's my first question. How? Because the way the human brain works is parallax for depth perception. How do you do your depth perception?
So
you move your head around a lot, or?
Well, so kind of, but I think a lot of it is because in the C-130 community, we fly with night vision goggles, and you don't have
no depth there. Yeah.
You don't have depth perception. So we already are used to flying with that. And now that I don't have depth perception, I feel like that kind of made it easier for me.
It's a nonstop NVG sortie every time you go flying.
It is.
You go.
And I have to move my head just as much as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Because when you fly with night vision goggles, you're limited to like a 40% field of view. So
yeah.
I'm limited to 50. So I got to keep moving my head.
Yeah. So you're doing it, in your car and everything too. So not necessarily in your car. Do you run into shit or miss shit or do you just or are you better at it? I mean,
No, it's funny that you mentioned that. So actually the scariest thing I did right afterwards was try to drive. So I remember it was about probably a month after, and I tried to drive and I was like, whoop, no, I'm not going to do that. That's not right. It's dangerous. But again, your body adjusts, your brain adjusts. And luckily for me, my depth perception is I feel like I'm closer to objects than I really am. Therefore, I'm super cautious because I think I'm going to hit it, but I've got probably feet still, which is good. So I don't hit stuff to the point where, I've gotten now it's like it's second nature to me now. I've taken my car to the track and everything else. It doesn't, it really doesn't affect me anymore.
Yeah. But that's part of the challenge to overcome, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But it does take a while for your body to get used to that. And as a civilian aviator in the FAR, you have to wait 6 months for your eye to kind of stabilize before you're able to get this waiver. So,
all right. So let's go forward a second. So you went from doing the flying in Africa back to Afghanistan, and you were flying.
So I went to fly the MC-12W, which is a King Air 350 with external tanks, and it's an ISR mission.
Yeah, has a lot of sensors on it. ISR stands for what? So you can explain it.
Well, you know what? I don't actually know what it's
intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance.
ISR.
Yep. Yeah. So there's sensors on it, a lot of radios. There's a bunch of equipment in the back. There's a sensor operator, and then there's pilots. Maybe more than one sensor operator.
You were Overwatch, basically, is what you are. Yeah. So you're watching things. The cool thing about that, it was a government. It was called a GOCO, right? So government-owned aircraft, and then commercial aviators. So we were civilian pilots, but I was on a Air Force contract. So this kind of gets to the first thing of the Air Force is signing off for me to be an aircraft commander for their airplanes.
You see the irony here, repeat?
Yeah.
But they won't let me
You can't touch a C-130.
Yeah.
They won't let me flying combat missions in an Air Force-owned aircraft in Afghanistan in a combat zone.
But they won't let him fly in the guard on the weekends.
With one eye.
At home.
But they won't let him fly another Air Force-owned aircraft at home that he's trained in. So we had...
Your government at hard at work for you.
Yeah. Well, because of that scenario and because he had been over there flying his ass off, we had now what I thought the perfect recipe to start standing on people's desks and saying, what is wrong with you people? What have you all lost your effing minds?
Yeah. Nice.
So to put the cherry on the top of that, so I did that for about 2,000 hours. And then I got hired it was actually the same company, just a different sector of the company. I got hired to ferry C-130s from Afghanistan to Portugal for their maintenance, their depot level maintenance. again, on an Air Force contract signed off by the Air Force to fly Air Force airplanes as an aircraft commander. So now I'm able to fly the C-130 and the MC-12W as a contractor with one eye, but as an aircraft commander, which is just like being in the Air Force. So it was the check rides, it's form-8 check rides, is which is exactly what we do in the Air Force. So we used all of that for them to write the exception to policy waiver and the waiver. And
Father had a big hand in that because he was working at the Guard Bureau / Pentagon at the time.
Yeah.
It all kind of
listen. We had a
back.
flight surgeon that was in our unit who was well connected with the FAA and well connected with the Air Force, the head Air Force surgeon, flight surgeon. I mean, we had all the people in all the right spots. So we had to strike while the iron was hot, and we got
and
it
actually,
done.
it was kind of funny. So we had the guys that they knew. Then we had my buddy who I had put on orders to work for me on that program that I got assigned to when I was hurt. He ended up being the exec for the general who had to sign my waiver. So he was able to walk my stuff around. And then that general who had to sign that waiver was actually my brother's old wing commander. So it was like the perfect storm of guys that I needed to sign this waiver. And again, it had never, ever been done before. And everybody said there's absolutely no way it's ever going to happen.
No, it's not going to happen. No, you can't be an Air Force pilot with one eye. So when did you take your check ride in the C-130 again? Because you had to go through the whole C-130 school.
So I got December 18 is when I got the waiver. I went to training in April of 2019 and took my check ride in, I think it was July or August of 2019.
Right. I think it was August.
Yeah, August of 2019.
Yeah.
So 7 years passed.
7 years.
Wow.
7 years is what it was. Basically, it was almost 7 years exactly.
On that day that you passed your check ride in August 2019, you became the first ever monocular vision, fully qualified Air Force pilot ever.
Yep, that is true. That is true. And to my knowledge, I think some other guys have tried, but I think I'm still the only one. It took 7 years, a lot of fighting by the right people. I had a lot of right commanders and friends and family in my corner. I mean, absolutely, like couldn't have done
awesome.
it. Absolutely,
Getting the right support. That's obviously
the
key.
support.
That's awesome.
Like I said, I was in a dark place when this first happened. And if it wouldn't have been for my wife and Fig, are probably the two most important people that I had going for me. It was,
I can't take any credit for that, dude.
Yeah, you say that, but
I just want to say this for you, for Repeat, and anybody that's listening to this podcast. There's something I learned about this guy, and that there's can't is not in his vocabulary.
Nice. And I get the fact that it took, almost 7 years. That's the nature of government bureaucracy and how slowly it moves. But you mentioned that other people have tried since and they're having difficulty, and that's just a problem. Once one guy has demonstrated it and the people have signed off and you've operated the airplane, come on, get a procedure in place and unscrew yourselves there. Get this fixed. There are people out there that are capable of doing the job.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I had a 2-3 year waiver, and my waiver came up for renewal in December, and they didn't approve it. Because they said it was too high of a risk for me to fly an Air Force airplane.
Is that something?
Yeah. And
he'd already been to combat.
At this point, I'd already deployed.
Hold on a second. This gets a little better, Repeat. Not only did he deploy to combat as a C-130 aircraft commander, my youngest son was on his crew.
Yeah. That's why I didn't know if you want me to mention or not. But
nice.
That was a very personal thing for me. I mean, it was awesome. Very rewarding. That was the most rewarding part of the deployment, was taking your son on my crew. But the fact is, I'd done everything, had no incidents, and then they're like, yeah, it's too dangerous, too much of a high risk. And it took another 5 months to get that waiver.
These guys are fucking morons, man.
And at this point, prior to that, I had instructor school dates prior to trying to get this waiver renewed. And we had to push them month by month back for 5 months. And so So then if they weren't setting me up for failure, I had basically, when I finally got the waiver, I had 5 flights before I went to instructor school. So it was 4 flights and a check ride. But everything went good. I'm now the Air Force's only monovision instructor pilot. So.
Oh, that's crazy. Well, I am super thrilled to hear that story, though. That is so inspirational, and success through perseverance in the face of overwhelming odds. And it sounds like great moronity. Is that a word? Moronity? Fighting it. Yeah, right?
Sounds good to me.
Yeah. Oh, that's inspiring. Very cool. I'm blown away by that story.
So it gets there's a little icing on the cake for you, Repeat.
Oh, nice. Okay, it gets better. So he's had your son on his
about
career.
a month after he became the first ever Air Force binocular vision pilot. He had an interview at the airline that I work for.
Actually, I had it before I went. April.
Really?
Yeah, I got hired in April. I started the month after.
And so I told him I made a deal with him that if he had gotten hired at this airline that I was flying at, and he ended up flying the same aircraft I was on, I would do his OE.
Oh, there you go.
And so we did. And I told him to bring an extra eye patch for me. And so we stood outside the airplane with our eye patches on. Of course, I wore it over the opposite eye that he had his eye patch on.
Right.
And you should have seen the looks that we got when the people got off.
Oh, it was great.
Did you walk around somebody's seeing eye dog at during the turn?
It's kind of funny because since it's Halloween time frame, you always see that pilot. The meme with the pilot with the stick.
Yeah,
and I'm just like,
the seeing eye dog,
that.
and
I can do that. But yeah, it was that was probably one of the best memories I had in my life. Was finishing my OE with Fig, and it came full circle. Because this was years prior. He said, "Hey, if you ever get here, I'm going to wear this patch on the opposite eye as you." And he's like, "Did you bring my patch?" And I'm like, "Here you go."
And I think the important thing for people to hear is the amount of scrutiny that you underwent. This is not.
My gosh, you talk about. Talking about being under a microscope. This guy has, and the hoops that he jumped through to get back to where he's at now. It's a testament to your perseverance, character. I don't know. Throw out a couple more.
Right on. Absolutely.
Right.
That is.
And talk about setting an example for his sons and the rest of the squadron and anybody in the aviation community that has a hardship or ends up with.
It doesn't even have to be the aviation community.
No, you're absolutely right.
Right. This goes back to the other shows we've had that have had a couple inspirational stories on there. When you think that you're done and things don't look very hopeful, a little perseverance goes a long way. Well, I should say that a lot of perseverance goes a long way, because I know it wasn't a little perseverance that got you there. But
it's been a lot.
Yeah.
And what's funny is it actually, I didn't even think about this till later on, like probably about a year ago. I've set a couple different records for the Air Force for eye stuff and waivers. For the Air National Guard, they had never, ever sent a pilot to pilot training that didn't have their wings. If they didn't have it was 2070 vision correctable 2020. And I had 2400. So I was the first Air National Guard non-rated pilot to be sent to pilot training that had PRK. So I am done setting waivers for the Air Force and I stuff.
Right.
So
good on you. No.
So it started off from the very beginning. Like I said, it's you talk about perseverance. That there's only so much a person can do, and that's what I know that everybody talks about this. You got to have a good support system. Family and friends, and then especially military, you have commanders that are willing to do what's right. Maybe it may not be the normal or the easy thing to do, but they got to do what's right. So.
It's a great story, buddy. And I appreciate you for sharing that.
It is a great story. Thank you indeed. And I hope there are people out there who hear that and go, "Oh, maybe it isn't time to give up yet. Then I will keep going."
If it's your dream, you got to do it. That's period. That's what it is.
Period. Dot.
Yep.
Well, we've been talking for a while.
Yeah,
Holy
I think
shit.
it's probably time to wind this thing up. Let me start by saying to you, Fatty, thank you for your service and thank you for sticking to it when it seemed pretty dark and you didn't think that was going to be something that was going to pay dividends. You stuck with it anyway. It looks like it did, and hopefully you've broken a glass ceiling or two for someone else coming behind you.
I sure hope so.
Well, that's about all the time we have for today's show, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up here. I want to first take the opportunity to thank you for spending your time with us. We know there are millions of shows out there that you have to choose from, and the fact that you've chosen ours is a great honor and very humbling to us. So thank you. One other thing you could do for us is to please continue to do what you have been doing and helping our show grow by going to Apple Podcasts app and subscribing there if you happen to have an iOS device or a Mac device. If you're on Windows, then you can find us on all other manner of podcasting applications. We're on Spotify, we're on Pandora, we're on iHeart, we are on Stitcher, and anywhere that you can find a podcast, we're there. So go search for So There I Was podcast, and you'll find Fig and Repeat. If you'd like to give us feedback, we would certainly appreciate it, or if you have any questions, you can reach us by email. First is fig@sothereiwas.us or repeat@sothereiwas.us, repeat spelled R-E-P-E-T-E. You can follow us on Facebook at sothereiwas.us/Facebook or on Twitter at sothereiwas.us/Twitter. Also, I want to take just a moment to thank our sponsor, robinsbirdbraindesigns.com. She will work with you to create a custom gift that is very, very elegant and shows that you've put a lot of thought and effort into getting the perfect gift for someone who has everything and you don't know what to get them. She has custom laser-etched slate coasters. Mine have some aircraft instruments and my airplane's tail number on it. Fig has the squadron logo, VMA 223 squadron logo, and his call sign on it, and the call sign of all the members of his family. So work with Robin at robinsbirdbraindesigns.com, and she will help you get a military unit logo, airplane instruments, any other organization with which you're associated, and customize that for you. They are absolutely gorgeous. You can go to the sponsors page on sothereiwas.us and see an example of what that coaster looks like. The link to Robin's site is there, robinsbirdbraindesigns.com. So, thank you for listening. We'll see you next week. In the meantime, stay safe and check 6.
I tried a borside lock and got an FCR fail. Then Lee turned into the sun like he does every fucking time. Oh, son of a bitch! Two's blind.
I'm here today to talk to you about a disease that's becoming more and more widespread as the season goes on: playoff ineligibility. In the past, cures for this condition have included everything from accelerated drinking schedules to trying to pay attention to hockey. But I'm proposing something much more radical: a healthy dose of vitamin NFC East. Are you tired of losing your division just because everyone else is trying too hard? Can you count the number of good defensive players on your team on one hand? And is that hand missing fingers because of a firework accident?